I could still smell the flowers from Michael's wake when I saw his ghost walk through the door. Not my Michael, of course. My Michael was gone, laid to rest just yesterday. This was Tiffany, the woman who left him 15 long years ago. She walked in like she owned the place, like she belonged there. It was still my home, filled with the quiet hush of grief and the heavy scent of lilies and roses. People were whispering, comforting each other, sharing memories of Michael. But when Tiffany entered, it was like a cold draft swept through the room. She didn't cry, not a single tear. Her eyes, dry and sharp, moved around, just scanning everyone, almost calculating their sorrow. It was unsettling. And her gaze landed on me, and her eyes were just cold, a coldness that went right through me, chilling my very bones. I knew in that instant she wasn't there to offer condolences. She wasn't there to share our pain. She was there for something else, something much harder. It felt like she had come to collect some kind of debt, a debt that never, ever existed. It was still so raw, losing Michael. Every breath felt like a struggle. And then this. She made her way through the room, not bothering to acknowledge anyone. Her heels clicked on the wooden floor, too loud for the solemn quiet we were all holding on to. She went straight to Mr. Davies, our family lawyer, who was speaking quietly with my sister-in-law, Brenda. Tiffany's voice, when she spoke, cut through the air. It didn't fit the occasion at all. It was clear, almost demanding. She said she was there to make sure Michael's wishes were respected. My Michael's wishes. The words felt like a slap. She spoke of him as if they'd just had lunch last week, as if she hadn't abandoned him all those years ago. 15 years, that's how long it had been. 15 years since she left him, just when his illness, that cruel shadow, was starting to show its first signs. I was the one by his side, every step of the way, through every doctor's visit, every whispered fear, every painful treatment. I was there, holding his hand, loving him. And she was nowhere. She just vanished, leaving him to face everything alone, with only me. Suddenly I felt it, the shift. The gazes in the room started turning to me, curious eyes, some filled with pity, others already with something much darker, more malicious. It was as if I was the intruder in this story, the one who didn't belong, the one who had somehow gotten in the way of a past she was trying to rewrite. My heart, already shattered by the profound loss of my son, broke a little more. The fresh, aching grief for Michael suddenly mixed with this burning feeling, humiliation, injustice. It was overwhelming. Here I was, in the living room of my own home, the very place where I had cared for him, cooked for him, read to him until his very last breath. And a stranger, a ghost from the past, had walked in. She wasn't just here to claim what was Michael's. No, it felt like she was here to claim the very memory of our struggle together, to erase 15 years of my devotion, of our shared battle. The weight of it all, right then, felt unbearable. The air in the room seemed to thicken, heavy with unspoken questions, with Tiffany's audacity. I stood there, rooted to the spot, trying to make sense of her presence, her words, my mind still fuzzy with sorrow, struggled to process this new, unexpected pain. I just couldn't understand. Why now? Why here? Why was she doing this, right at his wake? It felt so cruel, so disrespectful to Michael, to everything we had been through. I felt a silent scream building in my chest, but no sound came out. Only a profound sense of silent humiliation washed over me. It was more than just awkwardness. It was a deep wound opening up right in front of everyone. Her emotional coldness, her blatant disregard for the sanctity of the moment, it just amplified my own pain. I was reeling, trying to protect what little peace I had left in my heart. And what hurt most, what I didn't know then, was how much more complicated this would get. At that moment, standing there, watching her, I had no idea she didn't just want a small part of Michael's legacy. She wanted everything. And I was about to find out just how far she was willing to go. I was about to find out just how far she was willing to go. But in that moment, as her cold gaze finally left me, a different kind of ache settled in. An ache for all the years that led to this, for the life I'd lived, for the son I'd lost, and for the simple woman I was. My name is Eleanor. I'm 72 years old now, and for nearly 40 of those years, I was a nurse. My hands, now a little shaky with age and weariness, once knew how to calm a fever, how to soothe a fear, how to comfort a stranger. They knew how to care. My life was never about grand riches or fancy things. It was full, though, full of purpose, full of honest work, full of love. This house, the one she just walked into like she owned it, I built it with Arthur, my late husband. Brick by brick, nail by nail, we poured our dreams into these walls. This is where we watched our rose bushes bloom in the garden every spring, a little piece of heaven. And this is where I raised my Michael. Our greatest treasures weren't things you could put a price on. They were those roses, sweet and fragrant, and all the memories etched onto these walls, in every creaky floorboard, every sunlit window. When Michael, my sweet boy, got sick, my pension became more than just a source of income. It became an extension of my work, my calling. But this time, my patient was the most important one I would ever have. My son. The last few years, before he finally found peace, they were a blur. A constant, exhausting, heartbreaking blur of hospital hallways and sterile rooms. The clatter of IV poles, the smell of disinfectant. Prescriptions scattered on the kitchen counter, each bottle a reminder of time slipping away. Sleepless nights, so many sleepless nights, just listening to him breathe, or sometimes barely breathe. I was always there. I was the hand he reached for in the dark, the voice that whispered stories and calmed his fears when the pain made him restless. I was the only one who truly understood what each little groan, each subtle shift in his eyes, truly meant. It never felt like a burden, never. It was just love. Pure, raw, desperate love. The kind that makes you forget yourself entirely. I sold my old car. I emptied out all my savings, every penny I had put aside over a lifetime of work. I didn't ask anyone for help, not really, because I honestly believed, deep in my bones, that my duty as his mother was to be there, unconditionally, to give him everything I had until the very last moment. Michael, bless his heart, even when he was so weak, so tired, he still worried about me. He'd look at me with those beautiful, fading eyes and say, "Mom, one day I'll repay you for everything." And I'd just smile, a little shaky sometimes, and hold his hand. "Oh, honey," I'd tell him, "the only reward I ever need is having you here with me." We both knew, without really saying it, that our time together was getting shorter. The clock was ticking, quieter each day. That's why, in those last precious weeks, he started to insist on organizing his papers. He sat with Mr. Davies, our family lawyer, the same Mr. Davies who was at the wake today. Michael said he wanted to make sure I was secure, to leave things in order. I didn't pay much attention, honestly. My mind, my heart, my whole being was focused only on his comfort, on making sure he wasn't in pain, that he felt loved, that he knew he wasn't alone. That was my only concern. I was so lost in my grief, so consumed by the present moment, by the dwindling time we had, that I didn't realize. Little did I know that the security he so desperately wanted to give me would very soon become the terrifying center of a battle that would prove to be almost as painful as the illness itself. After that wake, the one with Tiffany's cold eyes, a strange quiet fell over everything. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of mourning. It was something else. A heavy, unsettling silence. Tiffany herself. She didn't call me. She didn't send a note. But her presence, her whole attitude that day, it started to spread like a chill. It poisoned the air around me, slowly, subtly. My phone, which had been buzzing with calls from friends and family offering condolences, it just stopped. People who had been so kind, so supportive, started to feel distant, like they were suddenly on another shore, waving from far away. I'd call some of them, and the conversations would be short, almost stiff. It felt like a wall was slowly going up, brick by brick, between me and everyone else. Even my sister-in-law, Brenda, Arthur's younger sister, the one who was standing right there with Mr. Davies when Tiffany made her little speech at the wake, even Brenda started to change. She called me a few days later, her voice a little too gentle, a little too cautious. "Eleanor," she said, "maybe it would be good to just hear what the young woman has to say. You know, just to avoid any trouble." Trouble, that word, it hung in the air. It felt like a seed had been planted, a tiny, thorny seed of doubt, right there in our family, right in the middle of my grief. And then the whispers started. You know how small towns are. News travels fast, and sometimes it gets twisted along the way. I started hearing things, little snippets of conversation from the grocery store or from neighbors who'd wave a little awkwardly. They said Tiffany and Michael had this old pact, a promise from years ago. They said he always said she was the great love of his life. Can you believe it? My heart ached even more. A fresh, sharp pain on top of everything else. Cruel lies. Just cruel. They were talking about an old pact and a great love, but they were completely ignoring 15 years of abandonment. Complete, utter abandonment. Where was she when Michael was fighting for every breath? When his body was wasting away? Where was she through every chemotherapy session, every hospital visit, Every single night I spent watching over him. I was the one there. I was the one by his side through it all. And now, suddenly, I was being painted as someone who was in the way, an obstacle, someone who might be interrupting some grand, romantic, interrupted love story. The pain of grief, already a constant companion, became sharper. It wasn't just the deep, aching loss of my son anymore. It was mixed with this suffocating feeling of being erased. Erased from Michael's life, from our story together. It was like Tiffany was trying to wipe me out of his memory, out of his last years. Every call that went unanswered, every look of pity or suspicion on the street. It was like a small cut. Each one just deepened the wound. I tried to stay strong, I really did. I tried to cling to the real memories, the sound of his laughter, even when he was sick, the way he'd squeeze my hand, the quiet moments we shared. Those were the real things, not the silly, made-up stories they were inventing about him and Tiffany. I knew the truth. I lived the truth. But it felt like the truth didn't matter to anyone else anymore. It was like my world, the one I had shared with Michael, was crumbling, and no one believed my version of it. I was so focused on trying to make sense of it all, on holding on to my own sanity in the face of these ridiculous claims. I was just trying to keep my head above water in this rising tide of gossip and accusation. What I didn't realize then, what I truly couldn't see, was that all these whispers, all this talk, all this distance, it was just preparing the ground. Preparing the ground for something much bigger, a much more direct, much more painful attack. And it was coming soon. And it was coming soon. I just didn't know how soon, or how brutal it would be. A week later, almost to the day after Michael's burial, the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, insistent sound, not the gentle chime of a friend. I walked to the door, my heart already a little heavy, a little wary. And there they were, Tiffany, standing a little behind a man I didn't know, but who had a look about him, an air of importance and cold confidence. He was her lawyer, I assumed. And next to them, my sister-in-law, Brenda, standing there like a silent witness. They didn't ask to come in. They didn't even wait for an invitation. They simply walked past me into my home, into my living room, the very place where I had spent countless hours with Michael, reading to him, just sitting in quiet companionship. The place where he had taken his last breaths, in the armchair by the window, now empty. The humiliation, it just unfolded right there, right in front of me. In my own space, a space still thick with the echoes of my son's life. The lawyer, a tall man with sharp eyes, didn't even look at me. He just placed a heavy-looking folder onto my antique coffee table, a table Arthur and I had picked out together so many years ago. "We're here to execute Michael's true will," he said. His voice was dry, professional, and utterly devoid of any human warmth. Tiffany stepped forward then, her voice surprisingly steady, almost rehearsed. She started talking. She alleged that Michael had promised everything to her years ago, that I, his mother, the one who had cared for him, had been a form of emotional coercion in his final years. Can you imagine? She claimed that I, a frail old woman, her words, had manipulated him on his deathbed, manipulated him to take his entire estate. She even put a number on it, $24 million. She said it was the result of some old investment he had made. $24 million. I felt a little dizzy. I, who had sold my car, emptied my savings, worked my fingers to the bone, not for money, but for love, was now accused of greed, of being a profiteer, right there in the very place where I had sacrificed everything for love. I couldn't speak. My mouth felt dry. My tongue felt thick. I stood there, paralyzed, unable to form a single word to defend myself against such monstrous lies. It was like watching a play where I was the main character, but I had no lines. I was just frozen. I looked at Brenda, my sister-in-law, my family, the woman who had urged me to hear what the young woman had to say. She stood there, silent. She didn't say a single thing to defend me. She just stared at the floor, her face a blank canvas. In that moment, the feeling of loneliness, it was the most real thing I had ever felt. It was a physical ache, a cold, empty pit in my stomach. They treated me like a criminal in my own home. They spoke over me, around me, as if I wasn't even there. The lawyer, after Tiffany finished her accusations, gave me a deadline. A cold, hard deadline to cooperate and hand over the estate. Otherwise, he said, they would go to court, and they would publicly expose me as a manipulator, as a profiteer. They would drag my name and Michael's memory through the mud of a public scandal. I didn't cry. Not then, not in front of them. My eyes felt dry, just like Tiffany's had been at the wake. But inside, I felt the ground disappearing beneath my feet. The world tilted. It wasn't just the shock of the accusations or the betrayal. It was the way they spoke of Michael, of our love, of our last years together. It was as if they were tearing apart the very fabric of our shared life, profaning his memory, profaning everything we had built, everything I had given. I just stood there, watching them, feeling utterly, irrevocably broken. I just stood there, watching them, feeling utterly, irrevocably broken. Then they left. The door closed with a soft click, but the silence that followed wasn't soft at all. It was deafening. It vibrated in the air, a heavy, suffocating weight that pressed down on everything. My first raw urge deep inside me was to scream, to pick up something, anything, and just smash it against the wall, to make a sound that could match the shattering chaos in my heart. But then, a lifetime as a nurse, nearly 40 years of it, kicked in. It taught me to stay calm, to breathe, to remain steady, no matter the pressure, no matter the pain. So, I took a deep, shaky breath, and then another. I just stood there, letting the anger and the humiliation settle, trying to find my footing again. My legs, they felt like lead, but I managed to move. I walked slowly, deliberately, down the hallway and into Michael's room. It was still exactly as he left it, clean and peaceful. I went to his dresser, to the top drawer where he kept his most important documents. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled it open. And there it was, an envelope, a plain cream-colored envelope with my name written on it in Michael's familiar, elegant script. I remembered. He had made me promise, not long ago, that I would only open it if something like this happened. He had looked at me with such knowing eyes then. I sat on the edge of his bed, the envelope in my hands. Taking another deep breath, I carefully broke the seal. Inside, just as he had promised, was an official will. It was dated just 2 months before he passed away. Clear as day, it left everything to me, his mother, everything. A wave of relief, so profound it was almost painful, washed over me. But then my fingers brushed against something else in the envelope. Something smaller, harder, a small USB drive. Michael. Oh, Michael. He knew. He knew they might doubt. He knew they might try to twist things, to distort our story. He knew human nature better than I did, even in his sickness. The pain of those cruel accusations, of being called a manipulator and a profiteer in my own home. It was still immense. It stung. But the memory of his care, his foresight, the way he had thought of me even then, it gave me a new kind of strength, a quiet, steady strength. I didn't call Mr. Davies, our lawyer, immediately. I didn't call anyone. I didn't reach out to Brenda, even though a part of me wanted to confront her, to demand an explanation. No, I just sat there. I went to Michael's favorite armchair, the one by the window where he used to watch the roses, and I sat down. And I just stayed quiet. The will was there. The USB drive was there. The truth was in my hands. They underestimated me, you see. They really did. Tiffany, her fancy lawyer, even Brenda. They saw an elderly woman, a grieving mother. They probably thought I would be weak, easy to manipulate, overwhelmed by everything. They saw me as an old woman, frail and helpless, but they forgot something crucial. They forgot that I was the one who had carried my son's entire world on my shoulders for years. I was the one who fought for him, who never gave up, no matter how tired, how heartbroken I was. That kind of love, that kind of commitment, it doesn't make you weak. It forges something in you, something hard and unyielding. And they also forgot one very important detail about this house. This very house where they thought they could threaten me. And they also forgot one very important detail about this house where they were threatening me. The days that followed that awful confrontation were a nightmare. It wasn't just the memory of their arrogance that haunted me. Tiffany, she started a full-blown campaign against me. On social media, on those internet sites young people use, she began posting old photos of herself with Michael. Pictures from so long ago, from before he got sick, before she left. Happy pictures. And under them, she wrote captions, flowery words about eternal love and how Michael's family, meaning me, had somehow pushed him away from her. It was all a complete fabrication, a cruel twisting of our history, but it worked. Our small town, it's not that big. News, even false news, travels fast here. People started looking at me differently. In the grocery store, at church, during my walks in the park, I felt eyes on me. Looks of suspicion. Pity sometimes, but mostly suspicion. It was like Tiffany had managed to turn everyone against me, without even speaking to them directly. She was painting me as the villain, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. It was crushing. Then came the legal notification. A thick envelope, official looking, with a cold, formal document inside. It wasn't just talk anymore. This was real. This paper, filled with legal jargon, formalized all their accusations, manipulation, coercion. It was all there, in black and white, making their threats concrete. My heart ached just looking at it. This wasn't about money for me. This was about Michael's memory, about our life together, being slandered and belittled. My sister-in-law, Brenda, she didn't help. Not at all. She called me every single day. Every call was another layer of pressure. "Eleanor," she'd say, her voice soft but insistent. "It's a lot of money for a woman your age. Really, it is. Maybe you should just share it with her. For goodness sake, just avoid this scandal. Think of Michael's memory." Her words, meant to soothe, felt like tiny cuts. Michael's memory. The irony of it all burned in my chest. I was thinking precisely of his memory. That was exactly why I couldn't give in. Each accusation, each suggestion to share, was a stab at the legacy of love and care that Michael and I had built together. Brick by brick, just like this house. Loneliness became my only real companion. It was a constant presence, a cold shadow, walking beside me everywhere I went. I felt like I was standing in a courtroom, a silent one, and everyone had already heard the prosecution's case. Everyone had already condemned me without ever hearing my side. My side, the truth, seemed to not matter to anyone. Tiffany's lawyer, he was relentless. He started calling Mr. Davies, my own lawyer, with these humiliating settlement offers, always treating me as if I was the villain of the story, the greedy old woman trying to steal from a young, heartbroken lover. Each offer was lower than the last, an insult. It was designed to wear me down, to break my spirit, and I felt it. I felt myself reaching my limit. The constant pressure, the public shame, the legal threats, the betrayal from family. It was all so much. I started to question if I even had the strength left to fight against all of it. Could I really stand up to this onslaught? Alone? But then, as I sat there, feeling so lost and so tired, my mind drifted back to Michael's room, to that envelope, to that small USB drive, and to the promise I had made to my son. He had prepared for this. He had seen it coming, and I had his truth right there. The strength I needed, I realized, wouldn't come from others. It wouldn't come from winning over public opinion or from smooth legal maneuvers. It would come purely and simply from the truth. And I was holding on to it. And I was holding on to it. After days of that crushing weight, the constant phone calls, the whispers, and the legal threats, I knew I couldn't just sit there anymore. It was time. I scheduled a final meeting right here in my house, my home, the place they so casually wanted to tear apart. I chose a time when the afternoon sun would stream into the living room, illuminating every corner, every memory. They arrived precisely on time. Tiffany, looking sleek and confident, her lawyer, a man whose arrogance seemed to grow with each visit, and my sister-in-law, Brenda. She looked uneasy, avoiding my eyes, but still, she was with them. They walked in, not with the hesitant steps of visitors, but with the assured stride of people who expected to take possession. They sat on my furniture, making themselves at home in a way that felt like an invasion. The lawyer, he started right away. He didn't offer any greetings, no polite small talk. He just opened his briefcase, pulled out a stack of papers, and began to speak of their final offer. It wasn't really an offer, though. It sounded more like a declaration, a demand wrapped in legal jargon. He spoke in smooth, professional tones about the division of assets, listing off figures, percentages, all of it cold and impersonal. Then he got to the house, my house. He started talking about the sale of the property to facilitate division, like it was just another item on a list, another thing to be liquidated, to be split. He spoke of my garden, the one Arthur and I had tended for decades, as if it were just a patch of dirt. My land, where Michael had played as a boy, as if it were just acreage. He talked about my home, the very walls that had sheltered my family for generations, as if it were merely a possession from Michael's estate, something to be sold off, something to be shared with a woman who had abandoned us both. I sat there, across from them, my hands clasped in my lap. I didn't interrupt. I just let them speak. I let him lay out their plan, their confident vision of my future, a future without my home. I watched Tiffany nod in agreement, a small, self-satisfied smile playing on her lips. I looked at Brenda, who continued to stare at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. I listened until every word was spoken, until the lawyer cleared his throat, signaling he had concluded. He looked at me then, expecting my surrender, expecting me to be broken, to accept my fate. When he finished, I rose silently from my armchair. My movements were slow, deliberate, each step measured. I walked past them, not looking at their faces, but towards the old, dark bookshelf on the far wall. There, tucked away behind some dusty old books, was a different kind of folder. Not the one Michael had left me, not yet. This one was older, thicker, worn at the edges from years of being handled. I pulled it out and brought it back to the coffee table, placing it gently next to the lawyer's neat stack of papers. I opened the folder. It revealed the crisp, yellowed paper of the original deed to this house, dated 1975, in my name, and in my late husband Arthur's name. My fingers traced the elegant script of our names. I looked up at them, my voice calm, steady, and clear. Not loud, but with a quiet power that seemed to fill the room. "This house," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but firm. "This house was never Michael's. This house is mine. You are trying to evict me from my own home." The shock on their faces was immediate. It was profound. The lawyer, so eloquent just moments before, was utterly speechless. His jaw dropped slightly. Tiffany, her face usually so had been so certain, so utterly convinced of their victory that this simple truth hit them like a physical blow. Then I reached for the TV remote. It lay on the coffee table, innocent and unassuming. I picked it up, pressed a button, and the large screen on the wall flickered to life. I selected the input, pressed play. The video from Michael's USB drive began. And there he was, my Michael. Thin, yes, so much thinner than I remembered, his body ravaged by the illness. But his eyes, oh, his eyes were clear, full of love, full of resolve. He looked directly into the camera, not at me, but as if he was looking right at them, at anyone who might try to harm me. His voice, a little weak, but strong in its intent, filled the silent room. "If you are seeing this," he began, his gaze unwavering, "it's because they tried to take from my mother what is rightfully hers. The money." He paused, a slight shake in his voice. "That money is mine, and I leave it to the only person who never abandoned me, to my mother." He looked away for a moment, then back to the camera, his voice hardening slightly. "As for the house," he said, "this house, it has always been her safe haven, her home, and woe to anyone who tries to take that too." Michael's voice, though a little weak, filled the room, strong in its truth. And then the video ended. The screen went dark, reflecting their stunned faces. They just sat there for a moment, absolutely speechless. Then, slowly, they got up. Tiffany was the first. Her pale face was still fixed in that shocked expression. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at her lawyer. She just turned and walked out, her footsteps silent, no longer clicking with arrogance. Her lawyer, he gathered his papers, his movements stiff and clumsy. He didn't say a word either, didn't even try to make an excuse. He just followed her out, defeated. Brenda lingered. She tried to stammer something, a small, choked sound that might have been an apology. But I didn't help her. I just looked at her, silently. There was nothing to be said, really. Nothing could explain away her silence when I needed her most. When they were tearing apart Michael's memory in my own living room. She eventually just turned and left too, the door closing softly behind her. And then, just like that, the air cleared. The heavy, suffocating weight that had settled over my home, over my life, lifted. The truth had been revealed, not with shouts, not with ugly arguments, not with vengeance, but with the calm, unwavering dignity of facts, and with Michael's own voice speaking from beyond. In the days that followed, the news spread through our small town like wildfire. Faster even than Tiffany's cruel whispers had. First, the lawyer had to withdraw his baseless claims, and then the whole story came out. The same eyes that had looked at me with suspicion, with judgment, were now different. They were filled with respect, or sometimes with a quiet shame for having believed the lies. It wasn't a triumphant feeling, not really. More like a quiet vindication, a settling of accounts, not for me, but for Michael. You know, people often thought I'd use Michael's money for a life of luxury. New cars, fancy trips, all those things I never had. But that wasn't me. That was never my dream. The money, it felt like a sacred trust. It was Michael's legacy, bought with his suffering, his fight. So I took it and I transformed it. I created a small foundation. I named it after Michael. It's simple, really. It helps families of cancer patients right here in our community. It pays for things like transport to hospital appointments when people can't drive or afford a taxi. It helps with medications that health insurance, even good health insurance, sometimes doesn't quite cover. It was a way to take all the pain we had endured, all the struggle, and turn it into something good. Something that could bring a little relief to others going through their own darkest battles. Michael would have loved that. And me? I stayed right here, in my house, my home, the place they tried to take from me, the place Arthur and I built, the place Michael grew up. It felt more like mine than ever before. It wasn't just four walls and a roof. It was a testament. My routine, it settled back into something simple, something beautiful. I wake with the sun, no longer burdened by the need to fight, to justify. I spend my mornings in the garden, tending to my rose bushes. And they bloomed more beautifully that spring than they ever had. Their petals seemed brighter, their scent sweeter. A little defiance, perhaps, against all the ugliness. I sit on the porch in the afternoons, sometimes with a cup of tea, sometimes just watching the world go by. And I talk to Michael, not out loud, of course, but in my thoughts. I tell him about the foundation, about the families we're helping. I tell him his memory is being honored, truly honored. I tell him how much I miss him, always. The peace I feel now, it didn't come from the money itself. Not from any amount of riches. It came from something much deeper. It came from having stood up, from having defended our story, from knowing that the love I gave, the unconditional, unwavering love of a mother, was in the end my greatest strength. It was stronger than any lie, any manipulation, any greed. The pain of losing Michael, that never truly fades. It's always there, a quiet ache in my heart, a constant reminder of what I've lost. But now, that pain shares its space. It shares it with a profound serenity, a quiet, deep peace that no one at all can ever take from me. I look at my hands now, these hands wrinkled by time and by all the work they've done. I think of how many times they've held Michael's hand, how many times they've cared for him, protected him. I look at my hands now, these hands wrinkled by time and by all the work they've done. They're not smooth and young anymore, but every line, every crease tells a story. I think of how many times these hands have held a tiny, fragile baby, how many times they've changed a dressing or felt a fevered brow, how many times they've carefully pruned a rosebush or kneaded dough for Michael's favorite bread, and how many times in recent years they have held Michael's hand, so thin and weak, cared for him, protected him with every ounce of my being. These hands have been a mother's hands, a nurse's hands, a gardener's hands. They have always been hands that served, that loved. Sometimes, people look at us, the elderly, and they see only the lines, the slower steps, the slight tremor. They see frailty. They see someone who might need help, someone who might be a little lost in the modern world. They forget. They forget the long journey we've walked, the mountains we've climbed, the storms we've weathered. They forget the strength that isn't just in muscles, but in spirit, in resilience. They forget the wisdom that comes from a lifetime of living, of loving, of losing. The strength we have built, quietly, steadily, over a lifetime of struggles and love. It's a different kind of strength, maybe, but it's real. It's the strength that lets you stand firm when everything else around you is trying to crumble. They saw me as an old woman, grieving, easily pushed aside. They thought because my body might be a little weaker, my mind, my will, would be too. They didn't see the woman who, for decades, worked long, exhausting shifts, always putting her patients first. The woman who, with her husband, built a home with her own hands, brick by brick. The mother who spent years fighting a quiet, desperate battle against a cruel illness, never once faltering, never once giving up hope for her son. They only saw what was on the surface, what was convenient for their own narrative. They underestimated the depth of a mother's love, the power of a life lived with integrity. They forgot that the gentlest hands can also be the firmest, especially when protecting what is most precious. I learned that respect isn't always given freely, especially when there's something to be gained. It has to be earned, sometimes even demanded, not with aggression, but with truth and dignity. I learned that my own story, my own life, held immense value, even if others tried. It taught me the deep importance of standing up for myself, not out of greed, but out of a fierce loyalty to Michael's memory and to the life we built together. It was about honoring our love, our struggle, our existence. It was about showing that an elderly woman's life is not disposable, that her contributions and her history matter. And you, have you ever felt invisible or undervalued by those to whom you dedicated your life? Have you ever felt that your story, the true story of who you are and what you've given, was being erased by someone who should honor you? It's a feeling that can cut deeper than any physical pain, isn't it? To have your life's work, your love, your very identity dismissed or twisted. It makes you realize how precious, how vital it is to hold on to your truth, no matter what, to remember who you are and the strength you carry, even when others refuse to see it. Oh, it truly does, doesn't it? That feeling, it's like a quiet storm raging within you, leaving a mark not on your skin, but deep inside your very soul. For a time, after all the ugliness with Tiffany and her lawyer, after the whispers and the hurtful accusations, I felt so raw, so exposed, like a precious old photograph that someone had tried to tear pages out of, trying to rewrite the colors or even the moment captured. But then, as the dust slowly settled, as I sat on my porch and watched my beloved roses unfurl their petals, as I held my quiet conversations with Michael in my heart, something profound shifted within me. I began to understand that while my story was deeply, intimately personal, unique to me and my precious son, the very core of it, the raw human feelings, they aren't so unique after all. That ache of being misunderstood, of having your truth questioned, the fierce, quiet determination to protect what's sacred to you, the stubborn hope that despite all the darkness and injustice, goodness, threads woven into so many lives, into so many hearts, all around us. When I decided to pour Michael's legacy into his foundation, it wasn't just to help others, though that was a powerful part of it. It was also, in its own way, to mend a little piece of myself, to transform the sharp, agonizing pain into a clear, bright purpose, to stand as a testament that even in the darkest valleys, love can still light the way forward. It taught me truly that our stories, even the ones marked by struggle and heartbreak, hold an incredible power. They connect us. They remind us, deeply and truly, that we are never entirely alone in our battles, in our quiet resilience. I spent so much of my life just caring, just doing, just being. Sometimes I forgot to speak up for myself. I believed my actions, my devotion, would speak loudly enough. But sometimes you come to a point where you simply must find your voice, even when it trembles with fear or weariness. You have to stand firmly in your truth and let it shine so that no one, no matter how loud or confident, can dim your light. It's not about shouting down those who tried to hurt you. It's about standing tall, quietly, confidently, in who you are and what you believe in. That, I think, is the deepest form of dignity. The quiet, unshakable strength that comes from knowing your own heart and trusting it implicitly. It's finding peace in that knowledge. And now, as I sit here, my days are filled with simple, everyday joys that feel like pure gold. The comforting scent of coffee in the morning, mingling with the fresh air. The gentle warmth of the sun on my face as I prune my roses. The distant sound of children's laughter drifting up from the park down the street. It's a profound peace I've truly earned, a serenity Michael would have wanted for me. It's not about forgetting. Oh no, I could never, ever forget my Michael. But it is a living filled with quiet gratitude and with the deep, reassuring knowledge that love, in the end, always, always wins. It always leaves its beautiful, indelible mark on the world. My love for Michael, his unending love for me, it was never erased. It lives on, not just in these old walls, in the fragrant roses, in the help we give to others through his foundation. It lives on, vibrantly, in me. And that, my dear listener, is why I wanted to share this with you, to offer a piece of my journey, a glimpse into that quiet, enduring strength I found. Because I believe, truly, that we all carry these stories inside us, these quiet battles fought, these moments of profound truth and grace. And sharing them, it makes us all a little stronger, doesn't it? It reminds us that even when the world feels cold and impersonal, there's an incredible warmth to be found in understanding, in connection, in shared humanity. So if you've listened to my words, if these real stories, these quiet moments of truth, have touched something in your own heart, then I truly hope we can keep sharing them. Keep this precious connection alive. You know, sometimes these online spaces, like YouTube, they can be a bit unpredictable. They might quietly unsubscribe you from a channel, or somehow hide new stories without you even realizing it. It's a funny thing, this digital world, always changing. So if you feel a connection to what I've said, to the kind of honest S, confirm you're still subscribed to this channel. And if you are, or if you gently resubscribe, maybe even tap that little bell icon. Just a soft touch. That way, we can make absolutely sure we stay in touch. We can keep these heartfelt conversations going, keep these real stories flowing. It's just about staying connected, isn't it? About remembering that we're not alone in our journeys, in our quiet victories, in our hopes. Thank you for listening. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, it means more than you could ever know. This connection, it truly means the world.